Hi there, friends. I've been getting a lot of questions lately about how to add fractions or subtract fractions that don't have the same denominator. We would call that an unlike denominator. And I want to show you this method. It's the 4-box method. I think you can see why. And this helps you remember the different steps because in order to add fractions or subtract fractions that have different denominators, you have to do something to the fractions to make them have the same denominator. So let's take this one for example, 2/5 plus 3/10. Now, I can add these together, but I can't add them the way that they are. So I can't add fifths and tenths. I want to make these both be the same denominator. So what I want to do is I want to find the least common denominator. And the way I would do that is by finding a multiple of these numbers that they both have in common. So I'm going to list the multiples. And this is like skip counting, right? So multiples of 5 would be 5, 10, 15, 20, and so on. And the multiples of 10 are 10, 20, 30, 40. Of course, they go on forever. You only need to list 3 or 4 of them to get the least common one. So you can see that we have 10 in common and we also have 20 in common, but the least is 10. And so I want to make my denominators 10. So now down here you can see I'm going to rename them. I'm not changing the value, okay? It's still 2/5 of a pizza and 3/10 of a pizza, but I'm going to change the name of them. So instead of fifths, I'm going to be calling them tenths. Okay, so I've got my 2/5 here. And remember, one way that we can find equivalent fractions is by multiplying by a fraction whose numerator and denominator are the same, because the value of that number is still going to be 1, right? 2 halves are equal to 1, 3/3 are 1, 4/4 are equal to 1, and so on. And when we multiply a number by 1, we aren't changing its value. So what do I need to multiply 5 by to get to 10? Well, I need to multiply 5 times 2 to get 10. And if I'm multiplying the denominator by 2, that's right, I also need to multiply the numerator. So now I'm multiplying 2/5 times 2 over 2. Don't worry too much about what that means, except that you know you're renaming your fraction and it's a value of 1, so you're not changing the value of your fraction. So 2/5 is equivalent to 2 times 2 is 4, so 4/10. I've just made an equivalent fraction, and I think most of you already know how to do that. So this is just a reminder that if you find an equivalent fraction, you can rename your fractions to have the same denominator, and then it's really easy to add them together. So now I've got 4/10 instead of 2/5 plus 3/10. I still have tenths. How many of them? Well, I had 4 of them plus 3 of them, so I have 7 of them, 7/10. And then simplifying, I've had some questions about this too. Simplifying is basically the opposite of what we just did here. Instead of renaming your denominator to a smaller piece, we want to make the pieces as big as possible, but 7 and 10 don't have any common factors. There's nothing we could make this bigger pieces to, right? Like we couldn't make it 9ths or 8ths or 7ths or 6ths. So 7/10 actually is the simplified final answer, okay? Now, if it was something like 4/10, we can simplify this, right? Just by thinking backwards. So half of 4 is 2 and half of 10 is 5. So 2/5 would be the simplified fraction of 4/10, just as an example there. So anyway, this is how you rename. This is the most important part. Rename your fractions in order to add them or subtract them. They must have the same denominator. All right, friends, time to give it a try yourselves. Good luck.